was really struck. This is just on a side from the epistle, but how when Dorcas, it's Dorcas. That's funny. The translation we read tried to cover this up, but her name is Tabitha, which in Greek is Dorcas, right? Her name, so they cover that up because it sounds very silly. But this Tabitha, she died. It looks to be like she was probably a widow among the group of widows. The most poignant part of the whole story to me is that when Peter gets there, and she's dead, all the widows are there, right, in the church, and they are holding all the garments that she has sewn different people in their grief. I mean, this is it passes a little detail, but it passes over. I think it's beautiful, right? It's that you can see the physical manifestation of these people's grief and their missing of her, and how much Tabitha was loved. That people are saying that as Peter's coming in, they're holding all the good works that she's done, right, in their arms on her death. And I think that's a beautiful image of what a good death looks like, a good death that marks a whole life that's well lived. And what stands out to me with Tabitha is that when she died, people immediately knew the impact that she had made on their lives and the degree to which they would miss her. And so it's a beautiful reminder that, really, that's what, maybe we all kind of vainly and selfishly hope that, people cry really hard at our own funeral, right, and miss us. But despite how there is some vanity in that, nevertheless, it still has, I think, a pure root to it, and that is we want to matter to other people. And Tabitha mattered. And it was seen, people actually were holding physical evidence of how she mattered in their lives. And the mattering came about because of the good work, the sacrifice, the degree to which she gave to other people. And so if there's any sort of lesson to draw out of that, just very short detail in this story, it is that the measure of how much our life mattered is in proportion to the sacrifice and giving that we extend to other people. That's actually what measures a good life, is the degree to which that sacrifice then connects us and allows us to have a deep relationship with other people. And Tabitha had that. This is really just an aside. I just think that little detail is so significant. If we look over into the gospel today, we have another miracle of Jesus. And in this miracle, we have a very kind of odd setting, right? We have this pool of Bethesda. It's some sort of public miracle place, right, that happens. What we get in this story is a juxtaposition, right, between the type of healing everyone's seeking at this pool, right? There's blind, there's lame, there's just a bunch of cripples and needy, kind of sad people all gathered around this pool, waiting for some sort of bubbling or stirring of the water by an angel or some sort of divine agent coming in, and then the first to sort of scramble and push and elbow other people out of the way kind of gets it. It's a weird kind of setting as it stands in contrast to all the other miracles that Jesus has done to this point. And the point of the story is, in part, to contrast that type of miracle and healing that people are seeking, right, with the way that Jesus heals and does his miracles. And there really is a strong contrast here between the way that Jesus heals people and the way that these other people are trying to get some healing out of this pool. And maybe there's something here that describes to us sort of the type of healing that God gives us, and often the kind of foolish way that we seek healing in our own lives. One of the things you see is this idea that somehow the healing from this pool by the angel that stirs up the waters is finite and limited. Like there's just not enough to go around, right? And so only one person can get it. That's in complete opposition to the way Jesus heals. There's never a limit to how much Jesus is healing people, right? Like God shows his favor, and it's not like he can only have so many favorites, right? I mean, the beauty of a God of infinite love is that everybody is his absolute favorite, because that's the property of infinity. And so that stands in real contrast. The other one, too, is that somehow it's some like zero sum. Like, if you get your healing, I don't get mine. Right? This is a very worldly way to think about healing, as opposed to with Jesus, with the way he heals that man, that's simply not the case. The other thing is you see this place of healing becomes a place of neglect and coldness. Right? In that you could have a place that should be a beautiful place of happiness because people are getting healed, and to become a place where you see a poor, pathetic man who's been there for 38 years and no one bothered or was willing to help him or to make any sort of a sacrifice to get him into that water. Right? But then when Jesus comes, he sees that person. So what you have here is, again, this theme of Jesus seeing people, right, who are hidden or invisible or alone or neglected, versus a situation where people just disappear into anonymity and neglect. And this also, I think, just, we can contrast these as sort of a worldly way of seeking, a worldly way that people seek healing or wholeness, right, or seek what they want, versus what happens with Jesus. And in this case, they jump into the water, they get a miracle, but they don't have any relationship or contact with the divine. But in the case of Christ, they get to actually meet and encounter Jesus. They have a meeting. There is something relational versus something transactional on the other end. And so this also indicates that the point of the miracle, of the healing, of all of Jesus' healings and miracles, is not to simply, now you can walk, good for you, now you have your life back, you're back from the dead. I mean, the reality is, and I've said this many times, that those people get sick again, and those people raised from the dead like Tabitha die again, right? The real point of those miracles is to create an encounter so that those people can actually have a relationship, because the real healing of the heart and the root of all the other ills in our fallen world is the fact that we don't know how to be in communion with one another. And so that's what the miracle is serving, right? It's serving that purpose, some higher purpose that it has. And so in this story, as we contrast these two again, we can see that there's a bigger point to the healing, that this man is also transformed in some significant way, right, as a person. We'll see the same thing happen in 2 weeks from now when we'll read the gospel story of the blind man, right, where Jesus takes the clay and makes the eyes, right, and that's a very detailed story. There's a lot about it that feels similar to this one. And so we'll see that again, that the people that Jesus heals, it's not just a bodily external healing. They're transformed from the inside out. And so we can contrast a healing that's external, right, versus a healing that's internal. And the realizing that the real healing we have is not just simply like, you know what, if I just won the lot, this is a great example actually. If I just won the lottery, I could solve a whole bunch of my problems. And it's like, yeah, you would solve a bunch of your problems and create like 3 times more because of you, because you're the problem. Right? Like people who win the lottery often go bankrupt, have like high rates of like suicide. Like there's all these like bad stuff that happens to people that win the lottery. Like, well, why would that be? Like a couple $1 million like would solve a whole bunch of your problems, but it actually seems to actually increase many people's problems, because the real problem is always inside of us. Right? It's never ultimately really the external circumstances of it. And so this is an example of what we mean by internal healing or internal change, that the change in healing happens from the inside out, right? And it happens through a personal, relational encounter with God. And so these stand in sort of contrast of what type of healing that we have. And so this also helps us, both this story of healing, right, of the pool of Bethesda, the raising of Tabitha from the dead, these two stories do help us understand what the purpose of the resurrection is and what we mean by the resurrection as we stand in this Paschal period. That it's not simply getting your life back, right? It's qualitative change, right? It's not just quantitative. Oh, now I just get more years to my life, right? Now I have legs that work now, right? The point is that you're a different person now. So the change that is being given is much more significant, right? That we're called to. And so what is the resurrection, right? It is first and foremost, right, the resurrection that happens in the heart. And it's that internal change that when we're able to have the resurrection of the heart, we're able to have communion. When we're able to have communion, right, with God and others, then we're in touch with Him who is the source of all life and power, who can then raise us from the dead. And so the raising of the dead is a symptom of being in full communion with God. And so that's really the heart of this whole resurrectional period that we have. What's ironic about the story, or it's a constant irony, right? And then like you have the miracle and you're like, oh, I bet I know what's coming next in the miracle. Someone's going to be upset that it was on a Sabbath day. And it's like, and then people said it was Sabbath day. Oh, here we go. It's the same pattern again. And so what you see too is the mistake that the Pharisees are making about complaining about the healing happening on the Sabbath is the same kind of mistake that people are making, right, who are gathered around the pool of Bethesda. The people who are seeking the healing from the angel troubling the waters are making the same spiritual error that the Pharisees are making when they criticize this man for being healed on the Sabbath, and that is they are overly preoccupied with external obligations and external changes and do not fully see or understand that something truly internal has to happen and change for them. Right? The Pharisees are concerned that you're breaking these rules, but then they forget what the rules are actually all about, right? The rules have a purpose. And so one of the mistakes that we make, and this is the mistake of transactionalism, right, as well, is that we mistake proximal goals for the ultimate purpose and goal of a thing, right? Like the point of, well, what's the point of like Tabitha being raised from the dead, right? The point is that so she can go and keep sacrificing and loving other people, right? What is the point of this man getting this healing that he has? It's not just so that he can get up and walk now. It's so that he can be a completely different person in every facet of his life, right? And so it's easy to be like, well, what's the point of keeping the Sabbath? Well, the point of keeping the Sabbath is to put us in better relationship with God, right? To rest from this work, to focus and give time, right, in that relationship with Christ. That's the point of the Sabbath. Jesus reminds us that the Sabbath was made for man and not, man for the Sabbath. That it has, what that means is that it has some higher purpose, right? That it's not just the point of the Sabbath is more than just fulfilling the Sabbath, right? And so this inability to see that is a good warning for us, because in the religious life, with all the traditions and all the beautiful things that we have in the Orthodox tradition, there is a danger for those things to become Sabbath days in the way they are for the Pharisees in this story. That like our fasting becomes like, wow, I'm really good at fasting. Well, there is a bigger point to fasting than just being really good at not putting certain types of food in your mouth, right? There has to be a higher purpose than that. And so the inability to see that is also a kind of transactionalism. Like I'm just going to check off these boxes. I kept the Sabbath, I ate kosher, I'm a good Jew, right? And it's like, is that what God's really about? Or is he really about your heart, right? Which includes that, but puts those things in the right hierarchy of importance, right? So that these proximal goals or practices or spiritual rules that we have are in service to something higher, right? That I can actually be in communion with God and other people. And so the error that the Pharisees are making is a kind of transactionalism, right? A kind of external transactionalism that also many of the people are mistaking who are desperate surrounding that pool of water, right? And we kind of know that because one of the proofs is that this man has been sitting there for 38 years and no one bothered to do anything from him. You know who that man needed? That man needed a Tabitha in his life. Because you know what Tabitha would have done? Tabitha would have picked him up and put him in the water, right? That's the kind of woman she was. And so Tabitha is a great example that stands in contrast, together with Christ in the story, of the real miracle that we're seeking is to really have true connection and love with other people. And that is so hard to do well. And that's why we're here. That's why we're partaking of the sacraments. That's why we have all the spiritual practices that we engage in, is so that we can actually learn to love well, right? Not merely transactional, like I'm in a relationship because I get something from you and you get something from me, right? But a kind of relationship where we're both freely giving and sacrificing for each other, such that we become a type of person like Tabitha, who people, when we're gone and dead, are holding the evidence of our love in their hands, right? Like that is a beautiful sight, and that is what should motivate us through this Paschal season, right? Is to hopefully all the fasting and hard labors that we made during Lent are paying off, so that we can escape from sort of the worldliness of the Pharisees and the worldliness of the Pool of Bethesda, to actually learn to love people like Tabitha. Glory to Jesus Christ. Glory